in church, in the Catholic Church in Mount Kisco, and the priest got up and talked about movies which you should and should not see. And Dr. Strangelove had just come out, and the church had said, you can't go see that movie. So he asked everybody to stand up and take the pledge that they would only do what the church says them to do. Now you got to remember, this is a total room full of people, right?
Hundreds.
Hundreds of people. And they all stand up.
Except
my mother sat down.
Good job, Father.
So, I'm Vincent. I'm the number 2 son. I've been reminded of that many times by my mother. But my dear friend of 45 years, Patricia Baroni, where are you, Patricia? Told me this morning that I'm actually the first after the first, so I'm not really the second. But anyway, Mario's story is true, of course, and it illustrates my point, which is that my mother is a force of nature. And everyone who is here knows that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't know that. But many of you might not know exactly why she's a force of nature. How did that happen? Where does it come from? Well, I'm here to tell you where it comes from. She was born to immigrant parents, and she grew up in the midst of the Great Depression. She had a wonderful and hard-working mother and father. They were born in Italy. They immigrated here in the early 1900s. But her father, as wonderful as he was a rather domineering person. He was an old-school Italian, and it was his way or the highway kind of fellow. She also had 4 brothers, no sisters, but 4 brothers to contend with. Despite all that, or perhaps because of it, she excelled at everything. She was at the top of her class at Mount Kisco High School. That's a class of 1943. That's important. We'll get to that in a moment. She was a superb athlete as well. Of course she wanted to go to college. Obviously she was going to go to college. It's hardly a typical path, perhaps, for a child of immigrants, a girl, an 18-year-old girl in 1943, but so what? She was going. And her father said, no, you're not going. You can live at home, and you can certainly get a job as an operator at the telephone company because you're smart and they'll hire you. And it's right down the street. You can stay at home, you can walk to work, and then you can get married and have children. It's perfect. To which my mother said, no, I'm going to college. Father said, well, I'm not paying for it. You're on your own. It's 1943. So my mother stumbled across an ad, I think it was a poster in the post office or something, for the Cadet Nurse Corps, which is long since been forgotten by most people, but it was established during World War II to train young women, and they were all women, to be nurses to serve here domestically to replace all the hundreds and thousands of nurses who had joined the armed services and were overseas or were in training camps all over the country, all over the world. And the great thing about it is that it was free and you got a stipend. She didn't need her father's money or his permission. And so that's what she did. Not because she wanted to be a nurse, but because she needed to tell her father what to do with his ideas about her career and her future. Anyway, she gets a nursing degree, and at the same moment, the war ends. So now what? Well, now she has a skill, and she can work. And so now she's going to go to college. And where does she go? Chicago. That might as well be Timbuktu to her parents. But that's where she went. And of course, she worked full-time throughout college. Because she worked full-time, it took her 5 years to finish college. But she got her degree at Loyola and also taught nursing. She didn't need her father's money or his permission. By the way, I'm told she had a blast. I'll let her describe it to you privately. Apparently, she's made some notes of that period of her life and told us where they are and not to open them until after. Okay, so that was it, right? That's the end of her spirited nature, her fearlessness. No, not exactly. In 1950, having just graduated from college, she decided, well, I want to visit Europe alone, war-torn, post-war Europe. So she got on a cargo ship because that was cheap, and she made her way to Europe, where she spent 6 months traveling around by herself. By the way, my son, Tom, over there in the corner, he spent about that much time traveling around the world by himself. He thought that was a pretty cool thing, but come on. Grandma in 1950? Cooler. So that's where he gets it, of course. There's a fearlessness that runs in the DNA of my mother and through to my children, and it's a wonderful thing. Of course, she ran out of money in Europe. Why not? Why keep some of it? You might as well spend it all. She ran out of money. Her older brother, Joe, father of Louis, who is here, Louis is here, lent her the money or gave her the money, I don't know, whatever. It was enough to get her back. Loan or lent? You know that, right? Anyway, my mother was and is actually eternally grateful for that. To this day, she reminds us frequently of that. But she is grateful for that. Now she comes back to the United States. She has no money. She comes back to Mount Kisco, a place to which she was certain she would never return. But, you know, you got to do something, and you don't have any money, so you got to get a job, which she did at the hospital. What was the next mission? She's 27 years old. Well, of course, find a suitable husband. And fast. She's never been one to waste time. You might call her a little impulsive, but that's for someone else to say. My dad, a confirmed, not that my dad at that point, my dad, a confirmed bachelor in his 40s, 14 years her senior, was no match for my mother. Within months, within 6 months or less, they met, they were married. 9 months to the day later, after they were married, my brother Mario was born, and that's the true story, September 20th, 1952 to June 20th, 1953. A year later, I was born, and 2 years later, Louisa was born. So in 3 years of marriage, a little over, maybe close to 4 years, I guess, 3 children. Imagine that. She raised a family. She set high expectations for her children. She has been known from time to time to take credit for pretty much every one of her children's accomplishments. And if you don't believe me, just ask her. She was always a working mom. She was always a pioneer. She went back to school to get a master's at Columbia. She ran the senior citizens program here in Mount Kisco. She eventually went back into nursing, this time as an industrial nurse at these large processing facilities of the Postal Service in Mount Vernon and in Manhattan. Eventually she retired. Not. Because she got a job. So she worked at a company here in Mount Kisco, learned how to use computers. She sold real estate. She volunteered at the hospital and at the thrift shop. She was the president of the Katona Women's Civic Association in her mid-80s. Meanwhile, she found time to travel all over the world, from Hawaii to Israel to Italy to Ireland, even Cuba. Cuba, not Cuba post-normalization of relations. Cuba, I don't know when. I don't even want to know how she got there. She was devoted to my father. And now I'm getting choked up because my father was truly a wonderful person, and though not everyone in this room knew him, but most of you did. But he and my mother were very different people. And that's why it clicked for 51 years. In his last years, my father declined a little bit, not that much. He died at home in his sleep in his own bed. But she took splendid care of my dad. She was devoted to him 24 hours a day. Well, when he passed away at age 92, it was time to get restarted on her career as a world traveler. First stop, New Zealand. New Zealand, where she rented a car and drove the entire length of the country. Now, I don't know who else, I've never been to New Zealand, but it's 2 big islands. It's 1,000 miles. She went on the complete from the north to the south, crossed over north to south, and then she, for good measure, went to Australia for a few weeks. She wanted to go, and my dad was holding her up, so now he wasn't holding her up anymore. You know, my mother has always had lots of friends, and even more admirers. And much to her delight, many of you who are her admirers are here today. Now, she's not always easy to get along with, but that's okay. She's a fierce bridge player and mahjong player for money. Mom, how did you do at mahjong? I lost $1. Mom, how did you do at mahjong? I won $3. And she even teaches mahjong. And some of Mom's bridge and mahjong partners are here, and they will confirm, I'm sure, that my mother does not like to lose. That, by the way, is a trait that also has been passed down to her children and grandchildren. In fact, there is only one thing at which she has been a total, I would say, abject failure. And that is, at least today, and that is becoming a great grandmother. She reminds me pretty much every time we speak of that, as if I can do something about it. So Rose, Anna, AJ, Christy, Leslie, David, Tom, Carolyn, and Ken, get cracking. I really want Grandma to stop bugging me. Recently, my wife Grace spent a few hours taking my mom shopping. She told me later, the thing about your mom is she doesn't act, talk, or think like she's a little old lady. She just flat out refuses to be old. I mean, she just refuses. It's just, no, I'm not doing that. And I think Mark Twain may have said it best. He said, age is an issue of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So the only question is, what's next? Well, when we reconvene to celebrate my mother's 100th birthday, and which you all know we certainly will do. Does anybody disagree with me on that? I promise to fill you in on what's happened in the intervening year. You have a glass. Hopefully most of you have a glass. Let me get mine. We love you, Mom, Grandma, Emanuela, friend, neighbor, aunt, I'm sure Auntie. We love you. Happy 90th birthday, and many, many more. Cheers. Cheers.
Speech. Yes, absolutely.